doing good. Thank you for asking. I hope you're doing well. We are starting a new series this week called Like a Boss. And I think all of us have had the opportunity, or maybe we haven't, maybe we're just starting out in our high school career, or even just in general, the understanding of what a boss is. And maybe you have had that experience of being a boss or someone who's in charge. Whether that was being the captain of your sports team, like soccer, football, basketball, softball, volleyball, all of these different sports, maybe you were the captain of, or maybe you are the section leader for your section in band. Maybe you are a manager or a shift lead at your work, or even think about at school when you have group projects. Were you in charge of getting everything together? Were you in charge of making sure that everyone was doing what they were supposed to be doing? That would also kind of be like someone who's in charge or the boss. And maybe you haven't had that opportunity, and that's okay. There's plenty of time for you to be in charge of something. But one thing I can guarantee is we all have had bosses or have bosses in our life. Maybe we don't call them that. I mean, think about at school. Teachers are considered bosses. They are in charge of the classroom. You have coaches for sports. They are in charge of that sports team. Also think about at home, your parents. Yes, your parents are your boss. And I know, especially during this time, it can be, when you're stuck inside, it can be very difficult to want to listen to them. All of these people are considered authority figures in our lives. And there's one thing about authority figures: they all get on our nerves at one point or another. And maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, yeah, but that's just because I'm a teenager. That's how it works. It's what everyone says. But honestly, that's not true. This is a human thing. Everybody gets it. Everybody thinks and wishes that they were in the boss's seat of their own lives, so that no one could tell them what to do, when to do it, or how to do it. We would all be in control of our own lives. And it's weird because we know for a fact that authority figures will be and always be in our lives. No matter what we do, no matter how old we get, authority is not a new concept. It's not something that is brand new to you and you have to relearn it. No, it's something that will always be there. And it's weird because there are so many different reasons as to why we think this, why we think that it's new every single time. And I think part of the reason is because as we get older, this authority bugs us in different ways. It frustrates us on new levels. And there might be 1,000 different reasons as to why it annoys us, but I want to focus on just one. I want to focus on the idea that we sit there and we think, if only I was in the boss's chair, if only I was in charge, because I could do a way better job than them. Maybe you've thought to yourself, I know the situation way better than them. Maybe they don't know me as well as they think. Or even, I would handle this way better than them. And it's not that they're doing a bad job. It's just that you would do a better one if you were in the boss's seat. And I don't mean to bring this up to tell you that you're wrong, Because in some instances, you are actually correct. You would do a better job. But that's not the reality. And as much as we wish it was, it isn't. And having this kind of thought can bring us down a couple of different roads. I'm going to focus on 3. Number 1, you're going to challenge the authority. You would disagree with them. You're going to make it a point to argue with them, to tell them that they're wrong. Road number 2, you ignore the authority. This one, you don't actually verbally stand up to them and say you're wrong, but you ignore it. You ignore everything they say, do your own thing, and try and fly under the radar. And the 3rd road, you rebel against the authority. This one is that you hate what the boss is doing so much that you actively seek out the other direction. If they tell you to sit down, you stand up. If they tell you to stand up, you sit down and you glare at them the whole time. And no matter what road you go down, ultimately, it doesn't lead to a great place. I bet you have probably done this once or twice in your existence. I know I have. And normally when I try and do this, there is one constant thing. It makes everything more complicated, and I end up getting in a whole lot more trouble. Instead of gaining freedom, I lose freedom. Instead of gaining trust with that authority figure, I lose it. The chapter we're looking at is Hebrews 13. Now in Hebrews 13, this whole chapter is dedicated to relationships and how we handle them, how we handle relationships with people who are underneath us, i.e. we're the boss of them, and people who have the authority over us, so the bosses that are in charge of us. Now, in this chapter, we are going to be looking at chapter 13, verse 17, but we're going to actually break this verse into 2 sections. So I'm going to read the first section for you, and then we'll move on to the second. So, like I said, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17. Have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority. So this sounds pretty simple. I mean, the writer of Hebrews is basically telling us that we need to have confidence in our leaders and submit to them. This sounds almost too easy, right? But I want you guys to think about, we're going to take that first part. Have confidence in your leaders. Have you ever been able to have confidence in someone with absolutely no reason to? Regardless of whether they've done things that are wrong or right, whether they have done things that you think are bad things or good things, you need to have confidence in your leaders. Is that a choice you can make? I would say yes. And the way that I would argue this is by saying that we need to believe and have confidence in the good of people. We need to have confidence that they are acting out of goodness. They're acting with good intentions. And then we're going to move on to that second part, submit. We need to submit to them. Now, this one is a little bit more difficult to wrap around. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been around little kids, but if you have, it doesn't take long for you to realize that little kids don't like to listen. You will try and tell them to do something, and if it doesn't fit within what they want to do, what are they going to do? They're going to kick, scream, cry, roll around on the ground, and throw a fit, right? It doesn't work that way. I don't know if you've ever gone through the store and heard a screaming kid, a crying kid, because they weren't able to get the thing that they wanted. And while we don't do that on the outside, like we don't actually roll around anymore, or maybe we do a little bit, but we don't tell anyone, on the inside, we may want to do that. We may want to throw punches. We may want to hit things. We may want to throw things. Because in our eyes, the person who is in charge is doing something that isn't fair to us. All of this may be true, but let's look at what the second half of this passage has to say. Because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. So think about it. What this verse is saying that your boss, the person that's in charge of you, is not at the top of the food chain. They have to give an account or have to let the person above them know what's going on. They have someone above them. And that's hard for us to understand sometimes. Normally we think about it as our parents have the final say, or your boss or coach or teacher has the final say. But if you think about it, they have to report to someone. So take teachers and coaches. They have to report to the principal of your school. And then think about the principal. He or she has to give an account to parents, the school board, and even the superintendent. And then the last one, think about your parents. Your parents have to give an account to authorities like the government, your family, extended family, maybe even their parents. So it's not cut and dry like they have the final say. So let's pause right here, and we're going to talk about two different scenarios. All right. One is going to be a little bit tougher to talk about, and I'm going to talk about that one first, and then we're going to kind of move on from there to more of a common scenario. So the one that's hard to talk about is someone who's abusing their power. You have to remember that all authority has to give an account, like this verse says, right? They have someone who is over them that they must report to. And if you have been hurt by an abuse of power or an overly aggressive person who has used their power or their status to get what they want from you, I want to say I'm truly sorry that that has happened. But you're not helpless in this situation. The biggest thing that you need to do is, like we said earlier in this talk, you need to believe and trust someone. Whether that's a small group leader, or that's me or Bobby, or the pastor and a trusted adult. And unfortunately, sometimes it has to go as far as to the police. But this verse should give you hope and understanding that there is someone that that person has to be accountable to, has to give an account to. And understanding that they have that responsibility. From there, we go on to normal bosses that are working within their power. You have to understand that they also have other people that they have to give an account to. And ultimately, they have to give an account to the one true God. Understand that God is the utmost and the highest authority. Everything that is done on this earth will be given to God in an account when that time comes. You need to have faith and you need to trust that God is going to use that account to judge those who have done wrong and praise those who have done right. To summarize, your authorities have authorities. That ultimate authority is God, and God is watching their every move. So he will see what they do and what they don't do. God is also looking out for your best interest and theirs. And you need to understand that it's God's responsibility to act justly and fairly, not yours. I never really thought about that as a kid. And it makes perfect sense. But what makes more sense is when we look at the end of this verse. What the writer says here really changes how we should look at authority figures. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, for what would be no benefit to you. Think about this. So, as a kid, if you make their job as a boss or person in charge harder or a burden, how more likely are you to be miserable? The harder you make it on them, they're going to make it harder on you. But think about it. What were to happen if you were to honor your parents? Would you get more freedom or less? If you were to respect your teachers, would the year go by better or worse? When you listen to your coaches and listen to what they have to say and how they're trying to coach you, are you going to be more likely or less likely to succeed? See, we need to understand that when we are more respectful, helpful, and more willing to submit to their authority, not only are their jobs easier and a joy, but that also benefits us greatly. To put it shortly and to sum up this verse, the main point is life is a lot better when you honor and respect your bosses. So how do we honor our boss? Well, two things. First one, we need to understand what honor means. And honor means to greatly respect someone. Now that we have that out of the way, the second thing we need to do is identify who are our authoritative figures. Who are like our parents, teachers, coaches, and others. Who do we have to follow? You might ask yourself, okay, now that I have that, what do I do from there? And I'm going to give you two different things. Number one, if they are a great boss, if they're someone that it's easy to follow, you don't have any issues with, I want you to do two things. One, I want you to take notes on how they do things. And the second thing is to try and practice those things. Because think about it. You may not be in charge of someone today, but someday you will be in charge of someone. And why not take a page out of the book of those that have been great bosses to you and put it into practice to be a great boss yourself. And then now you're thinking, okay, but what about the ones that don't do things the right way or are hard to follow? Well, to that, there are two things you can do. One, say something. I don't know if you know this or not, but you can say a whole lot without saying anything. And when you say things, your words do matter to them. So be kind with your words. Be respectful with them. If they are someone that's easy to follow, let them know that. Tell them that you love them being in charge, that they're doing a great job. Encourage them. But if they're not easy to follow, if you have a hard time with that, keep that same attitude. Say the same thing. Say thank you when walking out of the classroom or off the field. Or you can stop rolling your eyes, tone down the sarcastic tone, Because even when you don't say things, they still get the message. So put this verse into practice. Watch how you speak to them verbally and non-verbally. And try and adjust that. And the second thing you can do is to change your attitude. Because attitude is everything. Do what they say to do, but do it joyfully. And you'll be surprised how much more joy you will have doing it. How much easier it will be to follow someone that you don't like when you have a joyful attitude about it. Because when we do things with joy, we do things because we are excited about it. That gives them the ability for their work to be a joy and not a burden. And from that, life is better when you honor the boss. I want you to really think about this. I want you to think about this for the next week. Think about how much more freedom, respect, and opportunities you would get if you were to really honor the boss. Would your life really change? And if so, how much? Yes, I know it's not easy, and I know it can be difficult. I know that sometimes we just get a really bad boss, and we'll talk more about that in this next video. But today I want you to focus on who your authority figures are and how you treat them. What's your attitude like? And how can you stop being a burden and be more of a joy to lead? And how much that'll change who you are.